Hello and welcome to the Take Charge podcast. I'm joined today by the founder of Sente Ventures, Serhat Cicekoglu. Sente Ventures are a VC firm with a strong interest in energy storage and a portfolio including the likes of Our Next Energy, also known as One, NiveauUp and Ni-Cat. 2023 has been a turbulent year to say the least when it comes to investment, and Serhat does a great job in offering perspective and advice to our community. Serhat is a person with real credibility, and I love the way that he articulates investing in energy storage. This isn't one to be missed. So, Serhat, it's time to take charge. Hi, Serhat. Welcome to the show.
Jamie, hi. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Very interested in this one, talking about investment, the investment landscape in the battery technologies and energy storage space. It's been an interesting year, to say the least, from that perspective. So, your insights and opinions and experiences are going to be, really valuable to our listeners. So, to start things off, my opening question would be, why do you invest in the battery and energy storage space?
It's something that I sometimes have a hard time answering it. It's just a difficult area, right? I mean, batteries have been around such a long time, and sometimes my friends are like, "Why now?" But I will set things up with my overall framework for investing, not just batteries, but for everything, and I'll tie it to why battery matters. So there's something that I heard a while ago. This is, for some people, it's known as rule of three. I didn't come up with this, it just stuck with me. Um, every human being, in average, can survive without oxygen for about 3 minutes, and without water for about 3 days, and without food, it's about 3 weeks. These are human essentials, and supplying this to everyone on Earth, the same quality that we all deserve, affordably, sustainably, is very important to me. And and all of these things are very difficult to make happen because of not only supply, production, etc. issues, but also the enormous amount of climate change impact on all of these value chain. Um, and scientists, policymakers, activists, ordinary citizens like you and me, even investors wrote about this. I'm not going to talk about the challenges in detail per se, but those challenges, if we agree, does exist, then energy plays a big role on it. And these challenges don't discriminate again a gender, demographic, a geography per se. I mean, COVID is an example of that. It doesn't discriminate between rich and poor, or west or east, south or north, and it kills everyone when it latches on that person, right? So if you think about that as a fact, and energy could play a vital role mobilizing the solutions that we are trying to build to handle food, agriculture, water issues, to produce them, to make them happen, to move things around. And when you think about it that way, you also need to make energy abundantly available to anyone all around the world. And the natural, abundantly available resources, renewables, and for renewables to really provide the energy that we need for electrifying everything, batteries are key. And I don't necessarily say that batteries are the only solution that we have to, you know, um, think about or invest in, but it will create a pretty critical role. The zero carbon world that we maybe are, at least some of our aspire to have one day, means a lot of electricity use, and a lot more than what we probably calculate today. And to make that happen, and to move it around is really not possible. So storing it is going to be key, and that's why I believe batteries is something that I should put my energy behind it with my colleagues at Sente Ventures. So a long response to maybe a relatively short question, but I wanted to explain that context because it's not just for the sake of investing in a technology, but there is a bigger context where battery and energy plays a significant role. But I'm not an energy investor. I'm not necessarily a simple battery investor. I am trying to make an investment in this domain to make an impact, or maybe even have a dent in a very big, very hairy issue of keeping all us maybe in a more sustainable world in a way that we all deserve to live per se.
Amazing. A great answer.
Thank you.
Really good answer. Um, and as you mentioned, you're not exclusively a energy storage investor. You have other interests and markets that you work in. So yeah, just at a high level, introduce Sente
Sure.
Ventures to us.
Sente Ventures is a unique investment process or a platform per se. It's not a typical venture capital fund, but we do focus on two domains. One of them is what we call, as I already mentioned, human essentials. It's about food, agriculture, and water related investments that we focus on. And the other one is industrial circular economy. It's about mobility, energy storage, and new materials. And these domains, we believe, are key to help us build a better future together. That's our mantra as a team. And we've been working in global ecosystems since 2012, and we started making investments since 2018 across 23 countries. And primarily, those are what we have been focused on, and we would like to keep it that way in the near future as well.
Great. And what's your, well, taking it back to
Mhm.
energy storage, what's your investment hypothesis in energy storage?
Um, Not just energy, but for all the domains, we have a value chain driven investment hypothesis. Instead of just maybe focusing on the downstream and where it touches customer or consumer per se, we would like to consider opportunities across the value chain, particularly if I may give an example on the battery value chain, it starts with minerals, right? The mining. Although we are not investing in mining itself per se, from the output of a mine, the next step is refinery, where you process the minerals to be, usable for cathode manufacturing, as an example. So we try to invest from that point all the way to recycling. For example, one of our investments is a company called Ni-Cat. Ni-Cat utilizes AI technology to improve the refinery processes to make the outputs more efficient, more productive, saves materials, or increases the performance of cathode materials. NiveauUp is another one that has been utilizing AI and other technologies to improve the cathode manufacturing process to make the batteries that use such technology extreme fast charging capable. As a matter of fact, as far as I know, it's the only commercially available solution, contrary to what's being written mostly in the media these days about fast charging. But whether it's successful or not, it's important to have a role in that in the across the value chain. But of course, our unicorn, our next energy, is an example of that. We also focus, invest in the downstream as well, and post downstream, the recycling is something that we want to do. However, I think if you are investing in that kind of value chain, you also have to understand what affects that value chain as well. So we do invest in electrification broader than just the battery. So we made an investment in a company called Make My Day, which is providing a solution to help commercial fleets adopt EV vehicles and as an extension battery technologies by better scheduling the operations for EV commercial fleet. So we just have to think about the systems approach. If you believe in electrification, you have to think about it in a systems approach. And when you think of it that way, you can't simply just invest in batteries, but you have to also think about what affects the successful adoption of batteries. So you have to think about electric motors, power electronics, membranes, electrolytes, recycling, all of that. But you also have to think about, other aspects when you're making investment decisions and developing hypotheses, such as talent, mean, as far as any kind of technology to scale something, whether the investments that you make will have access to talent, will they have the access to resources that they need, the business model, all of these are still developing. I don't think that we are set stone in terms of how battery industry will work next year or 5 years down the road. But that makes fun, investing into such an important thing with such an interesting context as I described earlier. So that sort of is why we have this focus.
Very good. It's fascinating. You talk about the whole ecosystem, and it's something that you're obviously passionate about. You speak passionately about it, rather than being, um, selective for other reasons. So that's good to hear. You mentioned there are a few companies, obviously Our Next Energy, NiveauUp and Ni-Cat. Is the future looking bright for these companies?
I believe so. I sincerely mean that, but it's not without challenges. There's no slam dunk. In early stage investing, pre-seed stage investments, like the very early deep tech investment stage that we're involved in. But like in any domain, every one of our startups in our portfolio have to win customers. They have to execute. They have to deliver what on their plans. And this is not just about EVs. This is not just about consumers. This is not just about any domain. You have to explain your value proposition to marketplace properly. You have to uh, explain the adoption that is needed for markets to utilize your technology. And in advanced fields like battery chemistry, this takes a while, and you have to be patient. And that's why the slam dunk mentality or quick wins mentality that in other domains that we're accustomed to in the VC world doesn't apply here. So yes, the future is bright, but it's going to take a while. But I also think that when execution in such complex areas is so difficult, partnerships matter as well. I see in the industry partners from various domains are coming to the table to make this industry a success. One example is Our Next Energy working with Berkshire Hathaway Energy renewables side of their investment portfolio to build a long-term off-grid power generation and power storage capability for a manufacturing facility in West Virginia. Make My Day working with Chevron, and others, quite a few of them are actually they do understand that this does not happen individually just because you have a bright idea and an interesting technology, but it does take a village to make things happen. So I do believe that's happening, and funding is coming to this field, and partnerships are happening more and more every day, and that makes me feel like the future is bright for this industry. But again, everybody has to execute. There is no slam dunk.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. As you say, patience, particularly in the battery world, is key. So that's the
Yeah.
challenge. Investor fatigue and things like that. It's important to manage from the company's perspective. So we'll get into that a little bit later. Um, it's difficult to answer this question with just one answer in this one small segment, but give me a little bit of insight into when investing, what your process is, and what you typically look for.
Mhm. So very good question. And my answer may sound pretty vanilla, or basic, but the first thing is talent. And I don't necessarily mean like, rock star kind of talent. I mean conviction of what the entrepreneur is working on, that the motivation behind it, the character of the team, and how they see themselves working on a very challenging solution like this over the next few years is the most important thing. The second thing that I try to look at is that whether the solution is a global solution. Is there a global need? Do we actually really need it? Sometimes, the innovations are simple hobby. they don't necessarily have an application in the marketplace. They may sound brilliant ideas, but does it benefit anything? Does it help agriculture? Does it help logistics? Does it help, water, whatever the problem context might be? If there isn't a really interesting application that moves the middle about our feature, I usually try to stay. I shouldn't use the word stay away, but try to use that as part of my investment process. And then the last one is business model. And when I say business model, I don't mean simply the startup just going out and creating a big revenue source itself, but understanding how it actually can happen. Sometimes it's going to be a startup, making it itself, but sometimes it's going to take collaboration among industry players, like we've talked about earlier. So, what is it? What will it take? And can we actually see a path, a realistic path towards that business model to be successful? Those are the top three things, and everybody in my line of work may have 50 other criteria to check, but these are my top three. People is the most important one because this is sort of like a 10-year, 15-year marriage, right? You're going to spend a lot of time with these entrepreneurs. It's not about the check. Some investors may be like that, but we're not one of them. I still spend a lot of time with founders that I invested 6, 7, 8 years ago, and I enjoyed that. And I don't mean that I'm always useful. By no means. I don't think that I'm always helpful. Maybe it's a minuscule number of cases where I can be actually useful, but I stay engaged. I try to support them. And if I'm going to do that, I want that to happen with people that I like. I don't want to really work people that may not be easy to work with. So we try our best to assess all of that, the conviction of the entrepreneur, why they're in it, and their character are the most important things of making an investment decision.
Great. And then the back end, or at least, well, maybe all of 2023 has been tough for securing investment in all industries, and
Yes, yes.
particularly the back end for battery and the energy market. So, what would be your advice to companies that are pitching for investment? And I was going to go on to ask, what would you want to see from them? I guess you touched upon that in the last question, but yeah, what would be your advice to those companies?
So this has been a very tough year, right? I mean, it's not there are multiple factors that created the challenging environment. One was, the interest rates. Everybody, can blame that if they want to. But I think we also inflicted this environment as a wound to ourselves as well, simply because the investment style that we saw for the past few years have been a bit um, anomaly, to put it politely, and that created a important, I would say, lesson for us for the future. Just because you have a lot of money doesn't mean that you're going to do better. And prudence in terms of how to recruit talent to scale your business, prudence in terms of how you use your capital to scale your business, your path to profitability, your path to before that positive cash flow is very important. How much you raise cannot and never should be a success criteria about a startup. What you need and whether you can actually, reach to that set of resources is important. I'll give you an example to explain myself properly. Um, Sometimes startups have lofty revenue goals, and when you decipher that bottoms up, you realize that to achieve such revenue goal, you have to have a number of people in your team, and if there is not a realistic path to hire that many people and make them productive to achieve those goals, whether it's the back end of the manufacturing, the logistics, the supply chain, or whether it's the front end of winning customers, delivering the customers, etc., then what you're raising today is not meaningful. And that, sort of what happened the past few years. And the situation got worse when after that period, we ran into an extreme interest rate pattern going up so fast, drying up the intent, not drying up the funds to be invested, but drying up the intent to make any investments in that environment, put startups into a problem spot because they use the cash that they shouldn't have on things that they shouldn't have. But then when they need more cash now, there isn't any activity. So to avoid such things in the future, I see this as a blip, an anomaly, and I hope that we will never find ourselves in a situation like this again. But the entrepreneurs have to be very frugal and focused on time to free cash flow, positive cash flow, time to profit, and use every lever, not just cash, but every lever they can. Could be partnerships, could be various other alternatives to get there as quickly as possible. That I think what should be the basic level of thinking of entrepreneurs moving forward. I don't think that, if you look at the market investment, trends for the last year, early stage did not lose much steam, which means that there is interest in investing in the future. It's just fact that the investments that are being made are made more in line with the past 4 or 5 decades of venture capital industry rather than the past few years of venture capital industry. Don't get me wrong. This is not a charity or philanthropy industry, right? This industry is meant to make money, and that works based on a certain formula. That formula has not changed over the past few decades. And we need to get back to that. But it doesn't mean that entrepreneurs actually have to suffer. So it's my job, I feel it that way at least, to help them think about this as not like a penalty, but it's more like a challenge. And how do we come out of that? How do we think about longer term more productively? And I see this lately in most of my portfolio companies. I'm expecting that to happen, and I'm sure every venture capital is expecting that to happen.
Very good. You talked to a lot of different points there, but just to kind of dive a little bit deeper, in a cash crunch
Mhm,
market, what should
mhm.
pitchers prioritize?
I think what I like to hear the most important first point in a presentation is that what is point B that they're trying to get to, and why they believe is what they're asking for is the adequate, set of resources, whether it's funding or something else. I need to see the conviction, hear the conviction, and the realistic assumptions, or even hypotheses to validate those assumptions, to be more grounded. I want to hear details. I don't want to hear buzzwords. I don't want to hear 30,000 feet assumptions. I want grounded data, and if that makes sense, if there's a logical explanation. And I think the next uh, set of point to be made in presentations or pitches is, I believe, the risks associated with that. I'd like the entrepreneurs to be, as much as to their best of their knowledge, open about the risks, what may fail, and have an open mind to work with us, at least brainstorm with us, to develop the mitigation plans, put them in place so that we're not reactive, but we're proactive. Our business is risk capital. I don't think that there's anything that I do doesn't carry a lot of risks, right? For God's sake, only 15% at best of the bets we make are successful in some shape or form. I'm not talking about unicorns, right? So it is the risk business. I just want to understand the risks that I'm getting into. I want to I want to make an educated decision to the extent that's possible, right? So I want that transparency. And the third piece that I would like to hear more is that how will they convince existing talent and the talent that they have to bring on board? It's one thing that you're asking for money. It's one thing that you're talking about risks. But the most important risk is talent, in my view, the talent that you have to bring on board to believe in the startup, to believe in the mission of the startup, and use that talent pool to success. This is not for everyone. Startups are not for everyone. It takes a certain set of character, commitment, persistence, to be successful, and it's just not for the entrepreneurs. So, are you ready to explain that tough environment that they're signing up for? Motivate them. Are you going to be able to do that? And I want to hear that, and I want to have a realistic expectation about that.
Mm.
I hope that these are useful points.
Very, very useful. And you mentioned an interesting point there about talent. How do they attract talent and retain that talent? Maybe some of these pitches should come forward with a recruiter in mind. A specialist recruiter
Oh
who knows the
yes,
market very
oh
well.
yes,
Maybe someone like
right.
me. Who knows? But in
But
a
to be honest with you, yeah, Jenny, you're right. I mean, if I'm an investor, if I tell you that, hey, you're a good entrepreneur, but you're not a good CFO or you're not a good CEO, I don't want the entrepreneur to take that as a criticism, but I want that to be a conversation starter to say, okay, how do we prepare you? Or how do we, equip you for that role? Or how can we work together? Find the next recruit to fill that position. Like, I'm not going to give you a resume, but I want you to, utilize all of us, our network, to find the person that you want to work with, and that's extremely important challenge in my view. I've seen a lot of my entrepreneurs making mistakes by hiring the wrong talent, losing equity, losing time, losing money.
Mm.
So yeah, you're right.
I was half joking, but thank you for backing me up. I,
Uh,
but I think on a serious note, yeah, kind of asking that investor, how do they differentiate in the market? What's their USP? Why would people join them? Looking at the location, things like that. Very important questions, because you could have a really good recruiter, someone who has a great network, but if in those interviews you only have a 20-30% acceptance rate because people just don't believe in the company or the technology, then that's a challenge. So
yeah.
yeah, interesting point on the talent piece. And on the other side, so as we're talking about pitches, on the other side, what tips would you have for CEOs and entrepreneurs who are looking to maintain and optimize ongoing relationships with their investors?
Transparency, honesty. Um, when an entrepreneur hides the issue that's brewing, excuse me, what might become a big challenge, and if the investors are too late to be aware of those things, it limits their ability to help the startup. And if you're just coming to an investor at a particular later stage with more money, just because there could be something that can be avoided but wasn't communicated in a timely fashion, is a big problem. So transparency, open relationship doesn't mean they have to call me every day or every week, but it just needs to be a cadence of communication, level of transparency, uh, goes a very, very long way.
Great. And switching the conversation slightly, Sarha, I
Sure.
know you're a big Formula One fan. Um,
I am. I am.
First of all, who's your favorite team and driver?
So I'm a Ferrari fan, always have been. But full disclosure, I don't have a Ferrari, never had one. I don't know if I would ever be able to afford one. But um, my affinity with the sport started when I was working for Accenture, and I just realized that we were actually working with Renault team back then. And it's not the Williams Renault team. It was just the Renault brand itself had a team back then, and the amount of technology that we were actually providing for the car and for the team was amazing. The term industrial IoT that we are very familiar these days, that was like mainstream in those cars back then. And what I realized is that what happens at F1 becomes eventually, maybe in a decade or so, a mainstream feature in a consumer car. So that's sort of like where a lot of cutting edge things happen. And then after Accenture, I started working at AMD, and we were sponsoring Ferrari. And we were the technology, one of the most important technology for the team. And that was set. I became a Ferrari fan, and it was an easy decision. But when you think about not just the car, but the technology itself, drivers like Michael Schumacher, Niki Lauda, Alan Prost, Fernando Alonso, Sebastian Vettel, these are extremely unique, talented people, right? And but the team behind it, I mean, this famous thing about like, the pit stops, right? Like, how the pit team actually makes it like in less than 2.5 seconds. But that's not just that, but everyone behind it is what makes a driver like Alan Prost or Sebastian Vettel or Michael Schumacher successful, right? That if you think about it for a second, that's the entrepreneur, but everybody else have to believe in that entrepreneur. That's why they are on that team. It's not just for the salary, and you can see that when the driver crosses the finish line, the checker flag is flying for them. I mean, I think they feel more joy than the driver most of the time. I mean, just watch a clip, after a race is over for the winning team, right? And so to me, F1 is an excellent corollary to a startup world. I mean, it takes a village to make it a successful team. Every piece means a lot, and you have to recruit every piece carefully. And when it comes to mobility, F1 and UK for that matter, because May 13, 1950 is the day of when the first F1 race happened actually at Silverstone, and the UK ecosystem plays a significant obvious or played a significant role. I'm not sure if it does these days as much as it did back in the day, but yeah, F1 is a beautiful sport to watch. And I think at some point it might have been one of the most watched sport event live across the world. I'm not sure if that statistic's true, but it might be. But don't quote me for that. But
It,
it's fun.
it wouldn't surprise me. Amazing analogy, an unexpected one, but a really good analogy there. Um, and your favorite driver? Do you say it was Max Verstappen right now?
Oh, oh no, no, no. He
No.
pl- he drives for the wrong team. No, no, no. He's a wonderful driver. I mean, I think he doesn't have blood in his veins. He's one of a kind, and quite a few other drivers racing today are one of a kind drivers by their own right and their character. This is why I think the sport is so much fun to watch. To be honest with you, he is a brilliant driver. I wish he was driving for Ferrari, but hey, that's what makes the sport fun.
Yeah. Well, being British, I'm a big Lewis Hamilton fan, and kind of inspired me into the sport
Oh yes,
when he beat
oh
Felipe
yes.
Massa. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, oh, unbelievable driver. And he's a beautiful human being all around. It's not just, the track that when he's driving, but when you think about how Hamilton communicates with the team, how he, you know, conducts himself outside of the racetrack, his personal life, admirable human being, as far as I know. I'm not a friend of his, never had a chance to talk to him in person either, but what I've seen, very remarkable individual.
100%. And then the reason I wanted to bring up Formula One was because of the heritage in the UK, and the heritage
Yeah,
of automotive and things like
yeah.
this. There's been turbulent times in the UK. So, what in your opinion, does the future hold for the UK in terms of the automotive and battery world?
Um, I know that I'm going to be probably politically. inappropriate, but I think UK missed the boat. I mean, if you think about, Oxfordshire, Motor Valley, Midlands, etc. I mean, it's a formidable, ecosystem that you have, and a lot of things around the battery ecosystem has been invented in UK, and yet when you look at the current landscape, like I mean, if I'm not mistaken, there's about 25 gigafactory projects going on, one shape or form in US. How many of them are in UK? One?
I think so. Yeah.
And I am conveniently ignoring the bankrupted ones, right? So I don't think that you need any more data than that. With that said, though, what US proven is that you can change the rules of the game, and I think UK is capable of doing that. And the recent, the strategy that has been published is an interesting start. It's not there. It's an interesting start. And however, one caveat that I would like to share is that mimicking what everybody else is doing is not going to work in this particular subject. I think partnerships, I think picking a piece of the value chain and becoming, the most reliable, trustworthy partner as an ecosystem for that part might be the strategy that UK may actually successfully execute very quickly. I don't know which segment is that, um, but there is a rush to build as many vertically integrated gigafactories in every country on the map. And I'm not sure if there is a supply chain to support that. I'm not sure if there's talent pool to support that. I'm not sure it's necessary to do that. And what it does is it increases the cost of electrification. And I don't know whether that's what we want. And I'm not sure whether that's what UK should follow either. But I think it's an incredibly important ecosystem. It has done so much for electrification already, uh, and I believe it's going to do well eventually.
Yeah. Um, and geographically, where are you seeing the most advancement and progress when it comes to battery material cell manufacturing? Obviously, gigafactories, and not necessarily winning the race because of course, China
Yeah,
is way ahead. But who's catching them?
yeah.
Who's catching them up the quickest?
I think I feel like if we focus on catching up is when we're going to lose it, right? I mean, if you think about China, uh, so in US, the annual production of EVs is about 1 million vehicles, right? Um, China manufactures 1 million in a month, right? So is the right strategy to catch that, or is the right strategy to change the game? So I feel like commercialization of innovation, investments that we make into alternative technologies is going to be important. To be honest with you, I think I don't think that eh, China has to be the North Star for most geographies. China does what it does for its own plans, and it does it very successfully in a commendable fashion. But is the China strategy is the right strategy for UK or South Korea or for Turkey or for Germany or US for that matter? So I think if every geography thinks about this in a manner that would work best for them and for the overall ecosystem across the world, is what I think will be important for a successful recipe. So what that means is they have to focus on their innovation efforts into certain areas across the value chain. And sometimes it's not the same chemistry that China is focusing on. Maybe it's a different chemistry. maybe it's not the same segment that China is focused or US is focused on. It should be maybe the equipment across the value chain. Maybe it's the raw materials. There are a lot of things. I mean, it's a big value chain map. If you think about battery all the way from mining, from upstream to downstream, there are a lot of things that can be done. However, that what I think geography-wise or geopolitical-wise, the biggest issue is non-collaborative behavior that we, have been observing for the last 2, 3 years, maybe 5 years, and other geopolitical challenges that we're facing is making it more like everybody has to do their own thing and have their own, industry built ground up. So I wish I could tell you that here's where I see the opportunities are geographically, but I see chaos. So I'm not sure if I'm capable or intelligent enough to say that this is where the opportunities are. However, overall, the way I look at the battery industry is like a bakery analogy. Like, when I was young, in my neighborhood or many other neighborhoods that, that I'm accustomed to or familiar with, there was always be a bakery. They would bake fresh stuff in the morning, and by the time it's late afternoon, all would be gone. And they would come back and repeat the same thing. Now, if you can take a breath and think about battery industry above consumer EVs, or I'm sorry, beyond consumer EVs, we might actually see a lot of opportunities, bright spots in commercialization of other vehicles, fleets, maritime, um, logistics transportation, long-term storage in residential environments, storage in commercial environments, all the appliances. Yesterday, I actually did see a pitch that's actually using or thinking about appliances as a source, as a storage at home. Like, duh, like, why haven't we thought about that? We buy this stuff and put it in every household. They might as well have a storage element in it, right? So I think we're an amazing, animal type on Earth. We keep on coming up with great ideas, and I think geographically, every geography should play to its strengths, and instead of trying to mimic, should foster collaboration. And but one important lesson we learned, especially abundantly clear, it became abundantly clear was the COVID era, is that when we think about collaboration, we have to think about everyone who can afford the products and who cannot afford the product. And I think that's what I see happening more and more, especially the younger generation who is becoming the biggest investor pool in a decade, is going to change how we think about commercialization innovation, how we invest in innovation. And I believe that's above a geography or two. And I have a lot of faith in that movement for the next decade or two to come.
Very good. And you touched upon it a little bit before, geopolitics, and
Yeah.
how big a factor is that playing in the industry, and that as well as supply chain. Maybe we're not well set up enough in terms
Mhm.
of a supply chain perspective, an abundance of materials, available talent. Which in your opinion poses the biggest threat?
So if we continue the current trend of building gigafactories in every country on map, we're going to run into supply issues, and we're going to run into talent issues, and not just for you know. I mean, the factories will need people, right? So how fast you can transform those people from other industries, or how fast you can train new talent to come in factories, but then the equipment side of things, right? It's not just lithium or nickel supply. It's like you need equipment for these factories. So, who is going to produce them? That many, and the materials for that, and so it goes on, right? So we are creating a bit of a nightmare for supply to build the key supply called battery for electrification. So I think geopolitically, there's a big problem to be solved, and I'm not sure how and when we will calm down and reduce. I think capital markets will play a role in it. and we see this already in Europe, unfortunately. You, the European companies are moving to US because there's a big thing called IRA. Fryer is an example of that, and others are following the suit. I know a Turkish battery company, I won't name it, is building a big factory in US as well. I'm not sure why they're not doing it in Turkey. Well, I know the answer. It's because they don't have the same kind of funds available to them to build a factory that fast. So again, IRA skewed things up in a way that I didn't expect. Changed the game, quite honestly. But it's so far at the expense of Europe, in my view. And I don't know whether that's sustainable. And I believe U.S. Politics is, realizing that as well. And recent changes in the IRA law welcomed a lot of collaborative, efforts, which does no longer require movement into U.S. Per se. It does still encourage it, but not necessary anymore. But on the other side, say you're a European or Swiss Catot startup, and you have developed IP for the last 20 years. You thought that you were going to have your own factory. Well, there are no funds available for you. So what are you going to do? Either sell that license it to somewhere in US, or you move to US, and that is not sustainable. I never invested in entrepreneurs that would feel that they have to move to US. I just want the innovation to be available in US. So I feel this as a geopolitical challenge. But at the same time, a lot of other chemistry alternatives are coming into play. There's a lot of innovation that's going on in the upstream area that we don't. I mean, it's been written, but it's like they're not commercially available for the next maybe decade or so. So I see also this as a temporary issue. There's going to be hydrogen coming into in the space. I expect a lot from fusion in a decade, maybe decade and a half. Small footprint nuclear will play a role. So the role of battery is going to be a challenge. And as I made a comment about 40 minutes ago, saying this industry is still shaping. If anyone thinks that they figured this out and they know exactly how this industry is going to work, well, look at the reports 2 years ago. I read a report when I was preparing for our conversation today. I read a report 2 years ago from a very formidable investment bank, and I'm like, okay, if this institution got this so wrong with that many resources, it's not their fault. It's just the nature of this industry. It's still very fluid. And so anything with very strong conviction is dangerous, and anything that is not non-collaborative is also probably suboptimal, to be polite.
Amazing. Really good insights. You mentioned something interesting about talent wanting to move over to the US and from
Mhm.
Europe, and I'm seeing that a lot. A lot of European based talent, whether they be battery engineers, scientists, maybe manufacturing, all wanting to move to the not everyone, but there's a big trend in terms of moving over to the US.
Right,
But it's
right.
not easy for them to do so. The kind of immigration process
No,
isn't easy
no,
for people to do that.
no.
But yeah, that's as you say, it's a very fluid situation right now, and yeah, the next 2 years could look very different.
I think if I may add, uh, I mean, if someone who feels like they need to move to a different country to continue their life's work because no more an opportunities available in their geography is a tough call. I did myself went through that. I'm an immigrant and I moved to US 25 years ago. And it's disrupting their lives, right? I mean, if you think about that, they take their family with them. Well, not everybody, maybe managing a family, but it's in average that's the case, right? So it's not ideal. Of course, I don't want to sound like naive. Because people will migrate from one location to the other. That's normal. But when you see that as like an exodus, talent pool from one country to or from many countries to one country, constantly in that way. I think we've seen that it doesn't work well in the past, because what happens that when the reverse migration starts, like, there's that too. And so I hope that we can collaborate more amicably. That works for everyone. I mean, if you think about COVID shots, how quickly they became available in a short period of time. It wasn't an ideal process by any means, right? I don't want to sound like that. A big chunk of the population around the world didn't have access to those. But there is a process that we witnessed there that shows that there is maybe an alternative to do these things better next time when we need an innovation to become abundantly available to everyone on Earth, so we can actually all enjoy it. I sometimes try to use this example. Let's assume, Jamie, you're a billionaire, and I am not. The best phone that we can buy today is, depending on your flavor, is an Apple or a Samsung phone, right? Doesn't matter how rich you are. Doesn't matter how poor I am. That's the abundantly available innovation that makes our lives relatively easier. I want that for food. I want that for energy. I want that for housing. I want that for water, air. Uh, that's why the rule of three matters a lot to me.
Amazing. I've really enjoyed this conversation, Sarhat. So I've just got a couple more questions to finish off.
Likewise.
Um,
Sure.
so I'm sure you've learned a lot of lessons in your career, but what's the best one you've learned that you would also like others to listen to and maybe take something from?
Whoa. Okay, that's a very loaded question. Um, I I don't. I'm going to say something, but I don't want to sound like I am at that stage. I think I feel like I have to learn faster than I did have to a decade ago. And as I age, that's not possible. So I feel like it's extremely important that I find the best way to learn from generation older than me and generation younger than me, and 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 use everything that's available to me to learn faster. And whether it's AI, whether it's a paper book, whether it's listening to my daughter in college, doesn't matter what it is. It's just very important to learn in a different way and a collaborative way, and also share at the same time. I once upon a time was hoarding knowledge. I felt like that's what made me valuable. And about 2 decades ago, I started to change or tried at least to change my behavior and share and help as much as I can, and not not to expect anything in return, but that even that helping, the process of helping or attempting to help teaches me something. I wish I could do more. I wish I could travel more and learn more, and that would accelerate my understanding of some of the problems and what could be possible. So lifelong learning, but I think in a different format that's coming. And then that's not a threat. That's just exciting. And we can learn so much more so fast if we can actually figure out a way to work together, not just within our demography, across the world and across different generations. I'm very excited about the potential of that.
Amazing. There's been a good theme throughout, which was collaboration in this conversation, and
Mm.
um, it touched on some previous conversations I've had around IP and technology, and
Mhm.
not keeping that to yourself and sharing that and collaborating and ultimately building
Mhm.
on that innovation to ultimately get there quicker and make it better.
Mhm.
Um, and a closing tradition of this podcast is for me to ask you what you think the battery will look like in 10 years. But I think a better question would be, how do we advance where we're at to be in a much better place in 10 years' time? And I'm sure that would be collaboration, shared knowledge, working with each other, not necessarily winning the race, but having areas and pockets where some certain countries are a specialist based on their abundance of resources, and sharing that to ultimately achieve sustainability.
You said it very well. We need a better future together.
Yeah. Well, there's no need for me to ask you that question because I've just answered it for you. um,
Yeah,
but Sart, thank you so much for today. I
my
really enjoyed the
pleasure.
conversation.
Thanks for
Is there
having
anywhere
me,
that
Jamie.
no, no, my pleasure. Is there anywhere that I can point our listeners to learn more about you and Sente Ventures?
I think it's less about me, it's more about my entrepreneurs that I've had the privilege to work with, and they can find about them on our website, sente.vc. All the companies that we had the privilege to be part of their journey are listed there. And I'm happy to, to introduce them if there's anyone who wants to meet with them. But our work is about entrepreneurs, not ourselves. So I appreciate the opportunity to be with you here, Jamie. This has been a lovely conversation, and I hope that this my 2 cents uh, could be helpful to any of the listeners in some shape or form. I appreciate the time and the
No,
opportunity.
no, thank you. I've got no doubt it's added value. But good luck, Sart, and yeah, have a good Christmas.
Likewise, happy holidays, happy new year. I hope that 2024 will be a better year than the past.
Absolutely. Happy New Year. Speak soon.